glad you guys all made it to our talk on accelerating time to value with the Azure OpenAI service. I'm Chris Hoder, and we're going to have a great 45 minutes talking about how to use the OpenAI service and manage it at scale. And we also have some great announcements coming. So we didn't save all the announcements yesterday. We got a few more coming. So just to hop into it, we have about over 60,000 companies are using Azure AI and OpenAI today for their mission-critical workloads. They're depending on these services and the generative capabilities to drive, tremendous growth, business value across horizontals, verticals, industries. It's things like 𝗦𝗲𝗀𝗶𝗿𝗀, which we're going to talk about, that is being able to analyze previously unanalyzed data, getting value from that data that was sitting around, to BMW and cars being able to drive more efficiently, to Thomson Reuters, which we're also going to see being able to launch new capabilities and drive efficiencies in their business. And Azure OpenAI, it's powered, Microsoft itself is powered by Azure OpenAI. You can see where we sit in kind of the layer cake of offerings. And all of the announcements you saw on things like Copilot and Copilot Studio are all powered by these underlying services. And so we're learning how to run those services at scale, learning what's important for both performance and quality, and then bringing it to you all within the Azure OpenAI service. And for those that are new to the space, the Azure OpenAI service aims to provide OpenAI's cutting-edge AI models onto Microsoft as a first-party service. And so what that means is you get all of Azure's standards and typical services that you get within an Azure environment. You get managed identity, you get virtual networks, privacy, data security, regional controls. All of that comes out of the box and fully integrated within the Azure OpenAI service. And so you get OpenAI's latest and most powerful models, whether they be the O1 series or the GPT-4o series, fine-tuning, image generation, Whisper for transcription and translation as well on the service as a first-party offering. And just to kick it off with some great announcements, you guys here will be the first ones to know that we are announcing today a new version of GPT-4o. There's the 11/20/2024 version that includes great improvements on the quality around instruction following, creative writing, and deeper insights from uploaded files. And so this was just announced this morning, and we'll be rolling it out to the service in the coming weeks. Yeah, so it's super exciting. So we can't wait to see what everyone's going to start building. Other announcements that we're making, we've brought the batch service. And so this is the the ability to process bulk amounts of data to GA earlier this year. This provides a way to do hundreds of thousands to billions of tokens in a cost-efficient way at 50% off of what you pay in the standard environment. And then we've also announced and shipped the Azure Data Zones. This is a really exciting new way to help alleviate a couple of constraints that we see from customers around getting the model access and throughput that they need for their applications, while also maintaining the right data boundaries for their compliance and regulations. And so Data Zones sits in the middle between a global offering and a regional offering, where you know that and can be assured that your data is going to remain within the defined zone. And so today we have two. There's the US, and then there's the European Union. So you can be assured you'll get the model access and the throughput to grow and build your applications without having to bounce around different regions, which was a typical pain point we heard from customers in the past. And so if we take a step back and now look at what the service offerings in Azure OpenAI look like, we've actually ballooned this out a lot over the last years. And so over the last year, we've really been working to provide the right knobs and functionality to allow customers to optimize their solution to their specific needs. That works out to really two variables. You have the offer and the deployment type. And so I think about the offer as how do you want to optimize the performance of the model? And you're going to trade off things like latency and throughput and have a different way to use the service. So on standard is your pay-per-call. This is your easiest environment to get started. Batch, asynchronous, very large throughput, but it takes, say, 24 hours to complete. And then provision provides your high-scale, high-volume workload capabilities. And then once you choose the performance and approach that you want, you then choose what type of data structuring and controls you want in place. So we have global, data zones, and regional. Global, highest throughput, best access to models, but we're going to process that anywhere in the world, leverage Microsoft's backbone to really provide you the best access and the highest throughput. But your data is going to be routed around the world so that we can allow for that inference. Data zones, we'll keep it within a data zone, so you'll still get more throughput and more model access than regional, but maybe not as high throughput as global. And then regional is going to be the most constrained. That's your kind of classic Azure data promise. So just to hop into these offers in a little bit more detail and talk through them, the standard offering, this is your go-to offering. If you don't know what you want to start with standard. It's pay-per-use, it's free to set up, get started, so you can start your development activities, your experimentation without incurring a ton of cost, especially when you're not really making high volumes of calls. But at the same time, it can scale to tremendous volume. So we have some very, very large customers running entirely on standard and are perfectly happy, able to drive all the value that they want to their customers. And so it does have that high performance. It's also ease of management in the sense that you're only paying for what you use. And then if you do have regional requirements, this will be a little bit more regionally limited than the provision service, which we'll talk about in a second. So the use cases for standard, this is really the ideal for most use cases. This is where we expect all customers to start building and grow. And then once they optimize, they might choose to optimize to the other deployment types. And so it's going to be really cost effective, especially if you're at low to medium, even large, but not extra large scale, or you have a very intermittent and spiky workload. But, so it's good for that starting, but it's also very good as well for production. Provisioned, now provision provides some additional guarantees. And so it's a per hour billing model. When you go in and deploy it, we will provision the amount of capacity for that throughput that you need, and it's going to ensure that it's there when you need it, whether you're using it or not. And so it provides that reserved model processing capacity, and that becomes really critical if you have super mission critical application that you have to ensure that your throughput is there when you need it. In standard, there is no performance guarantee. And so if there's a very high or constrained time on the system, you could imagine maybe Black Friday, a lot of shoppers coming to the systems, a lot of systems trying to offer values to customers, there might be a little bit of interaction there, and your performance may vary a little bit more. Versus provision comes with our latency SLA, so you're going to be guaranteed to have a certain performance response rate compared to standard. And then if you're able to use this at a consistent high volume, you can start to look at cost savings through reservations. So as I mentioned, we announced earlier this month that we added the latency SLA to provisioned, which means that you are getting that guarantee on the predictable generation speed from the service. And so you'll get that low latency with the throughput. We also announced a couple of changes to lower the entry point to provision. So in the past, we heard a lot about, hey, I want these guarantees. It's just too expensive. I'm not going to utilize it enough. And so we announced at the beginning of November that we were dropping the entry point for global. So for GPT-4o, for example, from 50 to 15, and the increments from 50 to 5. So that's a 10x drop in the ability to scale up your solution so that you can better align it to your actual needs. And then with data zones, we're going to mirror that as well. And so with these wider offerings, you're seeing that when you go to global, you go to data zones, you're going to get more flexibility, you're going to get more tooling to optimize your solution. And so you're going to trade that off with the data processing guarantees. We also announced a bunch of cost savings. With Azure Reservations, we dropped the hourly price on global and introduced data zones with a similarly low price. So the hourly price was dropped in half. The monthly reservation price remains the same at $260 per PTU. A couple things to note, the hourly price is not where we recommend where customers land. It's ideal for some very specific use cases. If you want to test the service, see how it scales, see how it responds. Maybe you have an intermittent spike and need the guarantees. But if you are going to be using provisioned on a consistent basis, the cost value comes from monthly and yearly reservations. $260 a month works out to be about 35 cents, 36 cents an hour. So it's about 3x cheaper than the $1 per hour and 5x for the $2 per hour. What do you want to use provision for? So again, this is really around production workloads. It's about getting access to really high throughput that also comes with that predictable throughput and consistent latency on the generation speeds. So it really becomes cost effective and management effective when you are running very large workloads in production. So we like to think about starting in that standard, learning how to develop, learning what you're building, scaling up to provisioned as you get to very high workloads. So now I want to jump into a demo of this and show you guys a little bit more detail on how provisioned runs. So what I have, actually, let me jump back to main. I jumped to the intro on the slide. All right, the scenario and setup here. So we're not going to dive into the actual data, but you could imagine a scenario where you want to analyze questions about documentation. This is a pretty common one. Lots of customers have them. You might have a bunch of contracts you want to load into the system and summarize or ask questions on. Or you might have support cases that you want to understand the past trend with the customer so you can respond better in the current case. The result is you typically have very large prompts in very small generations. And so in this case, we're going to send about 15,000 tokens on each call, generate out about 50 to 250. And because you're kind of asking questions about documents, we expect some amount of repetitiveness. And so we're going to show how if you can get to a prompt cache match of 50%, how that affects your scaling and your cost optimization. And so prompt match rate, for those that aren't familiar, is basically a measure of repetitiveness in your prompt. If your prompt looks the same on each call, we're going to hold the computations of that temporarily for your service, and so we don't have to reload that into the model each time, and you'll get a faster response time, and we also offer discounts. It's 50% off in the standard environment, and it's actually up to 100% off in provision. And so when you combined provision deployments with prompt caching, you can actually get tremendous value, and that's what I want to show you guys today. So what I have here today, I have my Azure environment. I have a couple of resources set up. I'm simulating that production environment using Azure load testing. So this is just running a bunch of calls into the service. And then I'm streaming out the data of what's happening from Azure Monitor into a managed Grafana dashboard. And so you can see here, this GPT-4o mini deployment is currently doing about 220 requests per minute, and we're driving about 3.3 million tokens per minute through our service for this production scenario. And you can also just scroll down here and see that, hey, our prompt tokens are roughly what I said, about 15,000 to 15,400 tokens, and our generation window is actually pretty narrow at about 100. And so this is a great candidate for provisioned. I have a consistent workload of about 200 calls. It's running. In our case, we're going to run it 24/7. And so let's show how I could move this to provision managed and get some additional value. And so what you would do, you go into your studio. So I'm in the Azure AI Foundry focused on Azure OpenAI. In my deployments pane, I can go create a new deployment, go to GPT-4o mini. I'm going to choose my deployment option, and you're going to see all those options, those 9 options that we talked about earlier in the list. I'm going to do global provision managed. And here, you don't just set your TPM like you do with a standard deployment. What we have is this concept of a provision throughput unit, or PTU. And we add a little bit of complexity to give you a lot of flexibility. So we have one billing meter for PTUs. It's at $2 an hour, $260 per month. And that's across all the models. And so you can, once you have figured that out, you can switch your models without changing your billing mechanism. And so you can kind of separate out your development activities from managing your costs once you're set up. But you do need to figure out how many TPMs do I get per PTU, which varies by model. And so to do that, we have some handy calculators where I just need to know how many TPM I'm running in my system today. And so if we go back to our dashboard, I'm doing that 3.3 million and 21,600 tokens. Let me just fill that in. I think I have an action. All right, and you can see I need about 95 PTUs to deploy. I'm not going to deploy that here because I actually have one running, and you can see I have a provision managed, sorry, wrong line, provision managed running with 95 PTUs. And using the same Azure load test, but running against this one, we can hop back to our managed Grafana dashboard and take a look at it. And I want to show, let me jump back an hour here because we're going to show a couple of optimizations. And so you can see when I'm running that at the beginning, I have about the same 200. I'm actually running a little bit higher here, 254 calls per minute at 3.88 million tokens per minute. So I'm able to satisfy that throughput with my 95, as the calculator said. And we're doing the same workload definition. We don't have the cache match rate yet. And then we're also working on improving observability so that you can further optimize. And so you can see here I'm running this at 112%. So I'm actually fully maxing out this PTU instance, getting all the value that I can. My calls are taking about 1,300 milliseconds to complete. It's not streaming, and it's a fairly large window. And you can see I'm generating about 200 tokens per second. So it's actually really, really fast generation speed. If you're familiar with GPT-4o mini, the SLA for GPT-4o mini is 33 tokens per second. Now, you can imagine we talked about that repetitive prompt. So let's imagine we're able to optimize that and get our cache match rate up to 50%. Let's see what that does to the service. And so if I zoom back out, I've got to go a little further. That's exactly what we did right around here. You can see we scaled up to about 50% cache match rate. And if I zoom in on this time window, we can see that we're now doing 437 requests per minute on the same deployment with the same amount of PTUs on the same workload. So I was able to double my throughput by ensuring that those 50% cache match rate was occurring. So I'm getting now 6.68 million tokens per minute. And you can see we're doing the same token distribution and calls. We're also still running now at 100%. And you can see my time to last byte has dropped from about 1,400 to 1,100. So you get about 30% benefit to your speed as well. So with the prompt cache matching, you're going to get better value, better speed. And finally, just to conclude, the other value we'll get, you can see I'm basically calculating off of these values how much this would cost me per minute based on standard list price. It's about $1.01. And with that, I will hop back to the slides to do some summaries. So at that $1.01 cost, I forgot to update this slide, but if that $1.01 cost, if you calculate for 50% cache match rate, you're going to get a 75%, pay 75% of that. Works out to about 77 cents. The generation speed is, or generation cost was 3 cents per minute. You multiply that out to a monthly cost, it's about $34,000 a month. Versus for those same 95 PTUs, we could pay $260 per month with reservations for $24,700. And so the combination of running these at consistent throughput with high cache match rate is just going to continue to increase your value that you can get from the service and actually start to save a tremendous amount of money over the standard price. So just to recap the demo, because I know I went very quickly through a lot of items, we ran a production workload in global standard using Azure load testing. We then used the Azure monitoring metrics that are provided out of the box, streamed them into a managed Grafana dashboard, which allowed us to easily size the PTU, go and deploy our global provision managed deployment. We migrated the traffic in Azure load testing and then optimized to a 50% cache match rate to show you how you can get that value benefit. This also included a bunch of incremental changes that maybe are not newsworthy for the announcement slides, but kind of highlight our focus on continuing to make this easier and better for customers over the coming months. So we've done things like increased the throughput per PTU for GPT-4o earlier in the summer. We added the latency SLA. We've also added a lot of observability metrics and have a lot more coming over the following months. And so we added time to last byte. We added your generation speed, and we added the cache match rate. And so these are all new things that we're adding into the service to really help you get that scale and optimize your services once you get to production. So that was a really quick example of how you can use Provision Managed to optimize your service and scale it. I want to now invite Vinay Rudrappa up to the stage to talk about how he's getting value from these deployments. Hey, welcome. Yeah. So tell me about your use case and scenario.
Sure, yeah. But good afternoon, everyone. This is Vinay Rudrappa. I lead the platform engineering team at Thomson Reuters. For folks who don't know Thomson Reuters, we are a technology company focused on legal, tax, and accounting space. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm sure each of you have heard co-pilot. That's a big word out here at Microsoft, but I wanted to leave you guys with another terminology called as co-counsel. That's something which we've been working on for the last year or so. It's the Gen AI capability for all of our legal, tax, and accounting space. That's something in product, and we are kind of proud about it as well.
So tell me a little bit about how you're using Azure OpenAI to
Sure,
power
yeah.
that.
You talked about PTUs being an early adopter. We did have to go through a little bit of a pain on the cost aspect of it, adoption aspect of it, and everything. That's where this journey about so-called how do we optimize our LLM and so-called the TR LLM smart orchestrator, something which kind of started. I've just listed out what, why, and then how. It's a centralized API system, allowed our business units to adopt LLM services in a more mature way, in a more optimized way. And it was built to accelerate the adoption, not only the adoption, but keeping the cost in mind. That's where our initial journey kind of started, but we kind of expanded that into other capabilities as well. And I'm happy to say that the how part, this was all built on Azure platform with the partnership with the Microsoft, so certainly appreciate that.
Cool, yeah, and I think what's great about this is you were able to use these services and then figure out how to build on them and get around some of those challenges around managing them, high entry costs to build this orchestration engine that allowed the company as a whole to take advantage of it when maybe individual applications were not large enough.
It did.
And so, yeah, I'd love to see kind of the other cool thing is once you had this up, I think it expanded into a lot more services to create more of a holistic solution. So I wonder if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I'm sure you folks have heard about the Azure AI Foundry. I'm happy to say that that's being announced as well, which kind of addresses a lot of things which we're going to start working on. The extension of it is, I've just listed out like some of the LLM smart orchestrator capabilities. As I said, like it started off with optimized way of consuming our PTUs, but it soon expanded into more of a capacity management. When we procured some PTUs, making sure that efficient usage across different LLMs, routing the traffic to different regions. So that's where the capacity management roll along with is the standards and security aspect of it, automated engineering for easy adoption, a single API entry point for all of our business units so that consumption becomes a lot more easier, adoption becomes a lot more easier. And a big part is like, I did see that the Foundry kind of gives a view on your cost and usage reports as well. So that's something which we kind of built out using internally as well. Centralized contracts to make sure that folks use our PTU in a more efficient way. And also TR is big in, we are working towards our own SLM, like a custom model as well, infusing for a different data set with our own custom models. I think that became an avenue as well. Smart routing, I kind of talked about, routing the traffic against different models, against our custom models, against our different regions as well. Lifecycle management of the models, I think that's probably a big thing for most of the organizations with around 1,600 models in the in the portfolio out there, and also cost optimization. So I think the TR LLM orchestration has got us all the way, but we do look forward to continue the partnership with Microsoft, and then I've been a part of the CAB as well. I've been trying to give some influence on a few other things which the Cloud Foundry the AI Cloud Foundry can build towards and then give that capabilities as well.
Yeah, I love it because I think we've been learning a lot at where the pains are so that we can bring that into the solutions and help make it simpler for everyone. And I love this use case as well because we see this a lot with our customers, right? A solution in the generative AI space is not just Azure OpenAI. It's all of these things, lifecycle management, cost optimization, usage tracking, you have security and standards, and that's going to require a solution, which you can get with Azure. I did want to go a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more about the orchestration layer and how you kind of put that together in Azure.
Sure, yeah. I'm proud to say that, yeah, this solution was built out initially using the Azure workload and some of the Azure components which we used out here in order to stand up this so-called the TR LLM orchestrator, the Azure API management, which is the APIM layer. That's what we kind of used. Authentication, again, Azure Entra ID, Azure OpenAI service for sure, and then the Azure Container App, Azure App Functions, and Key Vault. These were some of the components which we kind of used in order to bring this TR LLM orchestrator together. From a reporting standpoint, we extensively use Power BI as well in order to build out this entire system. I've given a little bit of a high-level eye chart out there in order to give a view on how this was all built out, but yeah, cool. Happy to talk more about it.
Awesome. It shows you the complexity to really scale and manage a full solutions. And so finally, we talked a lot about the kind of the what and the how. Tell me a little bit about the impact it had on your business.
Yeah, so benefits of Smart Orchestrator. I think it's evident we kind of talked about the cost optimization, but improved performance, making sure that we get that performance throughout. PTUs is a big thing, making sure that when we put our co-counsel product out in the market, it gave out the right performance out there. So making sure that the improved performance, better distribution among different workloads. As I said, like we have a legal entity, we have a tax and an accounting entity. Each of these product teams are kind of using the AI services, making sure that it's evident for them or you get the right performance during their peak hours or business times. That's something like a better distribution. Enhanced utilization, optimization, like security across all of our workloads, and also making sure that we are kind of easy adoption, right? Like making sure that it's up and running quickly. So that those became a little bit of more of benefits out there. It's been well received across the organization. We've seen an accelerated path of our AI services growing at TR. Look forward to build more.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah.
Cool. So I would next like to invite up Steve Sweetman to talk a little bit more about the batch service.
Fantastic.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chris. And let's give Chris a round of applause, too. That's awesome to see. So Chris and Vinay did a great job at talking about the benefits that you can get from standard to get started, and then how provisioned can actually be a great way to scale your applications, and when used to the maximum can actually save you real dollars as well. And I love Thompson's example of drilling in and showing us how do you actually then scale that to the enterprise, not just one application, but to every single application across your enterprise by building that front-end service on top of APIM that actually aggregated all the applications and all the capabilities you need behind a single endpoint, delivering that end-to-end solution and service. So that was fantastic. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on Azure OpenAI Batch. So as Chris mentioned at the beginning, our fleet actually operates not only services for you as customers, but all of our internal Copilot applications as well. And why that's important is because during off-peak times, like in the evenings or on the weekends, we have a lot of fallow capacity, capacity that is functionally underutilized. And we actually offer that capacity back to you through this batch service. And so the way that the batch service works is that it actually allows you to submit a job, which can be queued for operating when there's excess capacity available in the system. And then we offer a 24-hour guarantee on when that job will be processed, and we handle all the processing for you. And so that job then gets submitted, queued, and returned, often well within the 24-hour period, and the benefit to you is that it's 50% off. So take the lowest rates that you already see on our standard rate chart and have it. And that's what you get with this batch processing. And so it provides truly low cost for processing a large amount of data. It really lets you scale to billions of tokens at a time that you can submit into your queue. And it becomes really cost-effective for large-scale processing. But rather than just me tell you about it, I'd actually love to invite another customer on stage who's going to share how they used it to drive innovations within their business. So Wanmei, why don't you come and join me on stage here?
Thank you.
Fantastic. So Wanmei, why don't you start by telling me a little bit about the amazing work that Ontada is doing and how you're revolutionizing the healthcare space.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for the audience for giving me an opportunity to share our work. Before that, I would like to maybe give some backgrounds about who Ontada is. You may have heard about a healthcare conglomerate called McKesson Corporate.
Yes.
Ontada is one of the business units within the McKesson conglomerate. So we have a number of sister organizations and to help united together to fight against cancer. Wow. Including the U.S. Oncology Network, helping the practice to reduce the administrative burdens, Sarah Cannon Institute, which help to effectively put patients into the cutting-edge clinical trial. And for us, Ontada and Genospace, really much focusing on in between the technology as well as making the data, driving the data into the insight.
What an important and powerful mission. I mean, I'm sure we all know someone, I certainly do, in my life who's been impacted by cancer. And it's amazing the work you're doing. So tell me, how are you leveraging AI as you're doing that research?
Absolutely. So we have a number of use cases in AI, since we are especially sitting in this unique position between the healthcare provider, patients, and the life science organization related to the data insight. So we have a set of use cases is really much about driving the data to figure out that those unanalyzable, unstructured data that in the longitudinal patient record that we do not quite use today, but they are batch historically, right, sitting there for a long time. So that is what we call the AI for real-world evidence. Second bundle is very similar to the first one, but more like the online use. If I put it into the more provisioning side, the PTU side, and the pay-as-you-go standard offering is still very similar, is to understand those unstructured documents, but in a real time, they're helping our provider to reduce that documentation burden. And finally, that we see that is as we continue the journey of AI, as AI continue to mature the reasoning capability, we will lead to using AI for clinical decision support. Think about that. There's so much longitudinal information about the patient. Some are structured, some are unstructured, some are imaging, multimodal, right? It's very hard for a physician seeing 20 to 30 patients per day to remember every single thing like, oh, what is the best next treatment, right? Given the history of this patient have been through. So we see the opportunity that going forward, the AI is also going to be helping us to reduce this cognitive burden and providing that best treatment alternative.
What an amazing vision. So just to reflect that back, so what I'm hearing you're saying is that you look forward to a future where AI can even help doctors in their decision-making by using the patterns that's coming from data. And even today, you're using real-time information from patient histories to help bring all of the data that a physician needs to make a decision at that time.
Yes, yes.
And going back to the beginning, there's all of this history from years of patient studies and records that you're processing through this batch service. So tell me, like, how much data are we talking about?
Do you know
what
how
are
much?
you doing there?
You want to make a guess?
Okay, go for it.
You want to make a guess how much data we have?
I have no idea. How
Okay.
much data are you processing?
We have, we have 150 million documents.
Wow.
Just that is only the look back of 10 years. It will be more if we look back for longer history. So we have about 2 million patients coming to see our practice every year. And we have, looking back longitudinally, that there are different type of documents. Some of them are because our provider are making note to himself or herself. And second is that because during the patient journey, patient actually go see many different services. A lot of them are outside of our provider's four wall. As a result of that, you can imagine a lot of report, like surgical report, like genomic report, they come in as a PDF. So we have 90 million PDF and 60 million progress notes. So together, 150 million. And that is where we really much appreciate the batch API service.
That's amazing. What an amazing use case, and I couldn't think of anything more impactful that our service is able to be part of. So thank you for bringing us on that journey with you.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Thank you very much.
So this is just one example of the amazing services and values that we're seeing customers getting on Batch. In fact, Batch is now our fastest growing offering that we have in Azure OpenAI. It accounts for over 10% of the total tokens being used, and it was only launched back in August, just a couple months ago. And so it's growing incredibly, incredibly quickly. So you've heard about our portfolio, and Chris really summarized it well at the beginning to say our goal is to ensure that you can create value no matter what stage of the application development lifecycle you're on. And we recognize that within your institute and organization, you may have multiple projects at different stages of the lifecycle. And so we want to bring all of these capabilities together for you, from standard, the place to get started, the place to begin your development, and even start to find product market fit, and a place to run your applications, particularly if you have peaky workloads that actually only have usage at one point of time during the day. And then you've got provision, which Chris demonstrated gives you that consistent, sustained, high throughput with the performance and latency SLA guarantees. That's something that you can bank on across your organization. And we've got Batch that offers you tremendous value when time is less important, but you do need to process a large amount of documents. You want to do a historical research on cancer, and you want to actually analyze all of those files. And across all those offerings, we then give you the choice around data residency and control. Starting with Global, which again gives you the highest throughput. And with Global, the data is processed anywhere in the world, but it still remains resident in the location of your Azure resource when it's stored. So any data, for example, that you're uploading to a batch service would be stored in the region of your choosing, which is be processed around the world. Then we have the data zones. These are brand new, still coming for provisioned and coming for batch in December. But these allow you to not only keep the data at rest with residency, but processing with residency around a region. And the two geographic regions we have today are across the US and around European Union member states. So if you create a data zone when you're in one of the European Union regions, you will automatically get the European Union data zone. And if you create a data zone when you're in one of the US regions, you'll get the US data zone. And then we do have 28 regions around the world, more regions than any other generative AI provider today. where you can actually deploy and maintain your data in that specific region, like East, or East 2, or West 3, or Japan, or Korea, or the US government federal space where we've just gone GA with our regions as well. And so you can keep your data isolated in that specific region. Now, there will be more constraints there. You won't get access to as many models and as much throughput. But if that specific geographic regional residency is something you need, we have that for you too. And so as you're thinking about these, don't think about any of them as a one-size-fits-all, but really think about them as a portfolio, where our goal is to help you achieve the most value you can, that we want to ensure that you can go to production in the way that suits your business, in the way that suits your workload. And every one of those we know is different and tailored to you, and that's our goal with our offering, is ensuring that you have the maximum flexibility to go into production whenever you want to. And overall, we think about the deployment options starting with global. So I talked about starting with standard. I also recommend, when you can, start with global. Global will give you the greatest flexibility. It'll give you access to the newest models. We always launch our models on global first. And it'll give you access to the most amount of capacity and the lowest cost for getting started. But we recognize that some of you have constraints from regulators with specific scenarios where you need to have those controls around data residency. And that's where you can start to then focus on, okay, where do I need a specific data zone? And where do I need a specific region? And again, I doubt that across your portfolio that any one of these by themselves will be the solution. But it's really the mix and match for your specific applications and what you need tailored to your offerings. And so with that, I'm really pleased to say that the Azure OpenAI service is aiming to deliver these capabilities to you. From the state-of-the-art models that we're shipping on the same day as OpenAI. As we said, OpenAI announced today the latest update to GPT-4o. And actually, it'll be available on our service in a couple of weeks. We're in a no deployment freeze right now because of Black Friday. But as soon as that's through, we're going to make that available on our platform too. Our goal is to be the best performing platform on the market. And we know that that performance is so important to you because that impacts your application performance as well. And so we're constantly benchmarking ourselves against our competitors in the market and aiming to be the best, to offer the best latency, to offer the best throughput, and the best value with that. And that really comes to cost efficiency too. Our goal is to be on par with the leaders in the market, offering the best models at the lowest cost. We're constantly looking for that trade-off between cost and value and ensuring that we can deliver that through offerings like Batch. And we're constantly exploring new business models too, where we can continue to offer you greater and greater value. But we recognize that that's not enough. We also need to ensure that your data is secure, your application is secure, and that's where building on Azure makes sense. We offer things like Microsoft Entra ID and managed identity integrated within the stack. We just announced the network security perimeter offering, which is going to be coming to Azure OpenAI soon, that actually lets you create data boundaries and data exfiltration protections to ensure that your data is never exfiltrated from your environment. We offer private networking for the Azure OpenAI service, so you can securely connect over your private network to the endpoint of your choosing, so the data never leaves your network in a virtual sense. And we're here to offer as much capacity as you need. We want to ensure that you have access to the highest capacity that's available, the highest throughput limits, so that you can scale to whatever size application that you need. We have some massive scale customers on our platform. You just saw how OnData was shipping over 150 million PDF files processing through our service at tremendous scale, and we make that scale available to you, all with maximum flexibility as well. And these are some of the promises that we have for you in Azure OpenAI. And so the actions that I want you to take away are these. First of all, go to the AI Foundry portal. Get started. Start to play with the service if you haven't already. Start with standard, start with global. Explore the latest models that are available there on the catalog. Those include the Azure OpenAI models and models from over 1,800 other providers as well, with our agreements with Hugging Face, with Meta, with Mistral, with Cohere, and others as well. And then start to scale in production. Choose the deployment that fits your needs and begin to scale there. And we look forward to going on that scaling journey with you. And so with that, I will open up the floor. Thank you for the round of applause there. I will open up the floor for questions. There are some follow-up sessions too, so if you do leave, please, I'll encourage you to go to some of these other sessions where you can learn more about other innovations that our customers are having. The McKesson team on data are going to do a deep dive more into how their solution was built and what they're doing to forward cancer research and innovation within their industry. We're seeing some amazing solutions in the assistant space, and hear from DocuSign about how they're creating intelligent agreements with Azure as well. So thank you very much, and thanks for coming to our session today. Thank you, everyone.